Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce you now. Jack Heald is a branding and marketing consultant and has acquired a diverse range of skills and talents throughout his extensive life experience. These include being a voice artist, podcast producer, copywriter, project manager, commodities trader, digital marketer, branding consultant, radio host. Oh, don't worry, we're not done yet. Content creator, teacher, software developer, stage actor, blues pianist, and public speaker. Wow. His expertise lies in assisting others in the creation, publication, and marketing of captivating content. Furthermore, he possesses an insatiable curiosity about the world. He is the founder of this company, Cult Your Brand, with a mission to help his clients build brand loyalty and spark a consumer cult. He has hosted several podcasts, including the one we'll be discussing today, the incredibly successful Stay Off My Operating Table podcast, hosted with his good friend, Dr. Philip Ovadia, who we hosted on episode 294 of Boundless Body Radio. I was also fortunate enough to be hosted on that amazing show in June of 2022. Jack holds a deep affection for Scotch whiskey, powerful motorcycles, and his beloved wife. You can find Jack on his website at www.cultyourbrand.com and also on Twitter at JackHeald5. Jack Heald, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
God, that guy sounds like he has trouble keeping his job.
He's got a mild form of ADHD or something. I don't know.
Oh, man. God.
Do you know how difficult it was to put that introduction together? Like, my first sentence always has to be like, who is this person? I'm like, I don't know where to start. He's done everything. I think he was an astronaut. He won the Super Bowl once. Like, I don't know.
You know what I haven't done that I really want to do? I would love to conduct a symphony orchestra. Oh my God, can you imagine? My formal degree is actually in music composition. Yes, he actually got a degree. He was able to pay attention long enough to come up with a degree. So I have a deep appreciation for the skills required to be a musician in a symphony orchestra. These are the people who are the tippity-toppity of the tippity-toppity in the world. And a typical symphony orchestra, at least a modern symphony orchestra, is over 100 musicians. Can you imagine having 100 people who are the best at what they do in the whole world looking at you and waiting for you to go,
crazy? Yeah.
what a rush. I don't think I have to do it but once would be
Wants to be awesome. This is not opinion. This is not subjective. Objectively, the best theme song of any sport or sporting event is the Formula One theme song. And there's a video of the symphony playing it, and it's awesome. I could watch it 1,000 times. And you're right. Like there's all these components. You see all the musicians. There's a choir, a vocal component that he's like. Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, that would be a very cool experience. That would be one that you would have to do and not one that I could ever do.
You should put the link to that in the show notes too, because people like me are going to go, oh, I wonder what that is. Of course, they will immediately, before going any farther in the podcast, go off and listen to it and completely forget what they were doing. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
After this conversation is done, be sure to check the show notes.
Right.
This is not the first conversation that you and I have had together. I was doing a second podcast sheerly because I really loved the process of podcasting. It's something I had to go out and learn how to do on my own, and I really enjoyed doing it. And like you, like podcasting has taught me so many things in my life. And you and I had a conversation on that show that I just went back and re-listened to. I didn't have the time or energy to keep that thing going, but man, that was a fun process. And we had a really cool conversation. I think I'll link that one in the notes as well, because anybody could go back and listen and learn all kinds of stuff about communicating and listening and some of the things we talked about, regardless of whether you have your own podcast or not. It was really interesting to go back. And so I really appreciated our conversation then. And I know today's conversation will be very interesting as well.
Well, it's fun to talk to interesting people.
And you're an interesting person.
Regardless of what they have to say. I met a guy, my best friend is a professional musician. I went and heard him gig last week. And one table away from us, there's this couple sitting, and they're hooting and hollering as Matthew is singing. And I just kind of got the impression that they were fans. And so I went over and introduced myself. Hey, are you a fan of Matthew? I'm a fan, Yeah, we are. And we got to talking, and this guy ended up being wildly interesting. I actually had a gig last night and he came and heard me. And it's just when you're curious about the world and about people, you get to find all kinds of cool things. And of
Yeah,
course, if you're not careful, I will hijack this conversation and God knows where I will take us.
that sounds great to me. I can mute myself. It's
You
easy.
know, well, I remember it was early 1980s. I lived in North Austin at 183 in Lamar, which is now the intersection of two freeways, I think, but back then it wasn't. And I was walking through a bookstore called the Bookstop, which I'm not sure is there anymore. And on the remainder table, kids, a bookstore, I don't have to explain all of this, but on the remainder table, I saw that this title of a book. It said, How to Build a Flying Saucer When So Many Others Have Tried and Failed, Adventures in Speculative Engineering. And parenthetically, wouldn't it be fun to write a book with a title that long?
Amazing.
Anyway, I thought, wow, that'd be cool. So I'm promiscuously curious. I picked it up, I started reading, and it set me down this path that I was probably already on anyway, which was, as a rule, if the experts say it, I assume it's false.
I love it.
uh, just kind of observing how the world seems to work.
That's perfect.
And I discovered Immanuel Velikovsky through that with his alternative history of Earth's geology, the galaxy's history, and that took me in a myriad of other directions. And what's fascinating, I love to tell about this. Velikovsky's books were published in the early 50s. Back in those days, textbook publishers were the most powerful publishers in the world. And Velikovsky's theories flatly contradicted the accepted official story of, oh, my wife just walked in. The official story of Earth's history, Earth's geology, the planet's history, the solar system's history, explicitly contradicted all of that stuff. And they, these textbook publishers threatened his publisher, if you publish these books, we will no longer do business with you. So he was an almost victim of cancellation long before cancellation was a thing. Um, and also keep in mind, this is the early 1950s before there was a space program. His background was in he was a expert in ancient languages or something like that, and he had been traveling around the world. And much like Joseph Campbell, he was interested in these common stories from ancient peoples around the world, and he kept finding common stories in these ancient languages. Um, and he said, if these people who'd had no connection with each other all over the world have stories that have kind of a similar theme and plot, maybe they've got a foundation in reality. And one of the things that was very common was a flood story, a catastrophic flood story. Long story, slightly shorter than the whole thing. That led him to speculate that if these stories actually have a foundation in truth, then there are certain geological factors that we must account for. Um, and he went looking for them, and sure enough, he found them. And he said, "Well, if that's true, then this must be true, and if that's true, then this must be true." But I don't want to give away the whole thing, but one of the things he did was he speculated about, this sounds crazy, but the makeup of the atmosphere of the planet Venus. Okay. Now, how did an ancient philologist come up with this? You'll have to read the books. But this was long before we had the ability to test this.
Right.
Well, guess what happened in the mid 80s? We put a probe onto the planet Venus, and guess what they found out? Velikovsky was right.
No way.
Way. Um,
Wow.
and this just kind of reinforced my basic bias that whatever the official story is of anything is probably not true.
Yeah.
And that may be why I've had however many jobs and careers I've had, because I'm a loose cannon, I guess.
That's great. Well, I mean, that's a perfect segue to what you're doing now. I think telling people that you are the co-host of the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast for our listeners is probably not going to be a huge surprise. I can only listen to a handful of podcasts on a regular basis and not really miss an episode. And so I'm very choosy, right? Like since we do so many podcasts, I've got to do podcasts listening to what their content is to really be up on what they're doing. And so I don't have many, but Stay Off My Operating Table is one. I don't miss an episode.
I appreciate
I
that.
really enjoy it. You guys came up with a really good format. Again, I don't think we're surprising anybody to know that you're part of that. You talk about yourself as the layperson. You talk about yourself. I've heard you say this is your words, not mine. The village idiot. And
Yep.
it's positioned where you are coming onto the show, especially in the beginning, like somewhat naive of some of this stuff, and you're presenting with Dr. Ovadia, who is a heart surgeon. And so it looks like, he's this ultra smart dude and medical research. And then it's you kind of asking questions and being curious and bringing it down to layperson. The format is incredible. Again, if you have not listened, wait until this one's done and then go over and listen to Stay Off My Operating Table and go subscribe. It's really good. But I want to kind of skip ahead in your own personal health story to when that started. Can you tell us the nexus of Stay Off My Operating Table podcast, the idea, working with Philip Ovadia at the time. And then with that, let's kind of thread in your own personal health story and the things that I guess you kind of learned along the way.
It's going to sound like I'm not answering your question. Have you seen the TV show This Is Us?
Yes.
You know how it goes, it jumps around in time, and yet they somehow manage to make it all fit together.
The first like
Um,
4 episodes, I was so confused and I would just cry every episode because it was like so emotional, but I didn't know what fit where. Yes.
I'm actually very careful about when I watch episodes now because they are so emotionally compelling. And there's days when I'm like, I don't feel like crying today. Well, I bring that up because I'm probably going to jump around in time. Phil came to me, God, how long we've been doing this? I want to say summer of 22. Well, you were on
Uh,
the show very early.
I was in 22. I think you'd been doing it before that. I want to say 21.
It may have been 21. Phil came to me. We were both in this men's group together, and he just kind of put out the word, "Hey, I want to start a podcast. Can you help me produce it, or can you produce it for me?" In addition to hosting my own podcasts, I've done a lot of production as well. So I said, "Yeah, sure, I'm happy to help you." Fully expecting that all I was going to do was help produce it, which is, for those of you who don't know what that means, I wouldn't be on the microphone. That's the significant part. So Phil's idea was he had his book coming out, um, and he was just kind of going to go through the book, the first few episodes. And I'm a born performer. I love radio. I fell in love with radio as a young teenager. KELI AM rock radio out of Tulsa, Oklahoma was really my first love. In fact, the first job I wanted to write the radio jingle where they went KELI. I thought, how cool would it be? Somebody actually wrote that to have your music that you wrote, where they say the radio call station letters to the music you wrote. Um, so I've done radio, I've done spit. I'm very comfortable performing and being in front of people. Phil, it was so funny. We had Dr. Georgia Eid on the podcast yesterday, and if you haven't had her, get her.
Sweetheart. That's the
Um,
last episode we just dropped. Sweetheart.
oh my gosh. And they were talking about how in their work they don't have to talk a lot, and doing the podcast has kind of pushed them out of their comfort zone. In fact, one of them, I think it was Dr. Eid said, or maybe it was Phil said, as a surgeon, I don't have to worry about my patients talking to me. Um, and frankly, when we did the early uh, practice episodes for the podcast, it was obvious Phil was not used to doing this.
Yeah.
And we were friends. We were in this men's group together. I wanted to see him succeed, and I was just really frank with him. I said, Phil, this is not going to work. And let me make a suggestion. And here's where the suggestion came from. When he came to me and said, would you produce my podcast? I said, under one condition, you appear on my podcast and answer every question I have. And I wanted to ask, I had these beliefs about the medical community that I wanted an insider to answer. He agreed to do that. He appeared on my podcast. He answered all my questions honestly and forthrightly. And most importantly to this story, he was actually engaging as we had the conversation back and forth, he and I. And so when it came time for him to do his podcast and it's just him alone on the microphone, he's not comfortable with it. And it wasn't good. And I knew people would just turn it off. And I said, look, let me suggest I'll co-host with you, because when we conversed, it was very good. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to be like training wheels. I'm going to teach him to ride. And once he figures it out, he'll take the training wheels off and I'll be behind the mic and no big deal. I don't really know how it happened, but this just turned into the highlight of my week, because he gets these awesome guests and people like Casey Ruff as well. Sorry.
I love it.
No, he gets these awesome guests doing cool things who have counter narrative views on all kinds of stuff, but most of it has to do with health. And I not only get to listen to them, but I get to ask them the questions that occur to me. One of the things that's been a continuing frustration to me most of my adult life. I remember in the early 80s, I used to listen to the radio all the time, and the news would come on, and there was always a financial section to the news. And the financial reporter would come on and say, the Dow was up 30 points today on news that blah, 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 blah. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? The Dow Jones Industrial Index is just simply a compilation of the 30 biggest stocks and the prices of those 30 biggest stocks. And the prices go up and down based on the decisions, the individual unique decisions of millions of people. You didn't interview a million people to find out why they bought or sold whatever. You're making stuff up. There's no possible way that's factual. And 40 years of listening to that kind of idiocy and lunacy passing as fact, I learned not to believe it. And as I would sit and listen to it, I wanted to ask those questions. Well, now tell me how you came up with that. That's the reason that this index went up. Tell me how come the economic news is this, and why are you not reporting on that? Or how come you chose to report on this instead of that? Isn't this other thing? But when it's one-way broadcasting, you can't ask those questions. Well, with the podcast, it's not one way. I get to sit there and I get to ask the questions. And it's fun. It's addictive. We've been doing it. I don't know. We just did episode 130, I think, yesterday. And I get to be on every single one of them, and I get to ask those questions. And I take my role as a proxy for the everyman pretty seriously. And I'm assuming if a question occurs to me, it's probably occurring to Joe Sixpack, who's listening to it. And more than that, I'm become conscious of, even if I don't have a question, because I've heard a lot of this stuff over and over again now. I'm conscious that there's people who probably are just coming into it, and what were the questions I had at the beginning, and what would I be asking? So I try to play that role for all the listeners who aren't medical professionals. I figure Phil can handle the medical professional side of it. I'm the Joe Sixpack side.
I, for one, really appreciate that. And I've been in this space for several years now. You guys have awesome guests. I'm familiar with a lot of them. A lot of them we've hosted on our show. But I have simple questions. Things pass me by, or I forget things. And so you do bring it down to be very well understood. And I really appreciate that about you. I'm curious, because I think this will probably tell us a little bit about your own health history kind of coming into doing this show. if we go back to the episode where you hosted Phil and you got to ask him anything you wanted about the medical industry, what were some of the questions you had? What did you ask him?
Oh, I ask him things like, so what'd they teach you about nutrition? Uh, and of course, his answer was almost nothing. Um, I think I asked him, um, if you asked the kinds of questions of your professors that you ask today, would they allow you to stay in medical school? And the answer, of course, was no, absolutely not. Um, uh, so a lot of those questions have I've let them go because I finally got I had a lot of my suspicions confirmed. And once I had an insider say, yeah, you're right. Um, you know, it confirmed that where I was working from, what I assumed were the facts were by and large true. I didn't trust medical professionals. I can remember in the late 90s, I went in to see my uh, primary care physician. The man was um, morbidly obese. Every time I went in to see him, I walked out with a prescription for either an antibiotic, uh, some sort of decongestant or antihistamine or something. I can't remember, one of those two things, or both. That was literally it. I walked in, regardless of what the problem was, I walked out with a prescription. And I can remember sitting in his office one time looking at this massive belly and thinking to myself, you don't know anything about health, obviously. Um, and I knew before I even made the appointment, what was going to happen was I'm going to walk out of here with a prescription for erythromycin or amoxicillin. Why do I need you? And good God, I lost the question, Casey.
No, it was perfect. It was just asking what kinds of questions you had up to that point and
Oh
relating
yeah,
it back to your own personal health story. It sounds like there was just the bullshit meters were going off constantly from what seemed like if you already knew what the appointment was going to be and what you were going to end up with, you're right. Like, why do I need you? What's going on?
yeah. I can remember early 80s, um, the experts, in air quotes, uh, told us that eggs and butter were bad for us and margarine was good for us. And my then wife and I at the time looked at each other and said, there's
Wow.
just no way that's true. I said, and in fact, I said, I don't care if butter is bad for me. I am not going through life eating margarine. I hate
Wow.
margarine. I'm eating butter. And of course, 40 years later, we know it was all complete bullshit. Um, but I can remember as a child, I can remember my mom complaining about our PCP at the time, saying every time we go, she prescribes antibiotics. I think she's over prescribing antibiotics, and she was. Um, and later in life, I've realized my mom is a real rebel. She she masquerades as somebody who plays inside the lines, but she likes to be outside the lines, and I'm just like her. Um, so I came by it honestly, and 25-ish years as an adult of not really having a decent alternative to the normal medical system. Um, 2005, my marriage ended. I was under extraordinary stress. One of the cool things I've learned on Ovadia's show is that the kind of stress I was under, it's not merely mental or merely psychological effects. It has physiological effects that are absolutely detrimental to your physiology. God knows I was feeling it in my body. And, you know, this was actually the last time I went to a normal doctor. I walked in, made an appointment, walked in, explained that this guy, I don't know, he may have spent 10 minutes with me. I think I'm exaggerating. He was the single most unhealthy human being I have ever seen in my life. Um, the complaint I had was gastric reflux, just nonstop acid stomach. And so anybody who's been through the system knows what he did. He prescribed something to reduce my stomach's ability to produce acid. And I walked out of there thinking, this guy's an idiot. And he made no effort to figure out what's the root cause. Why is your body overproducing hydrochloric acid in your stomach? Just, oh, well, you're producing hydrochloric acid. Here's a pill that'll make you produce less hydrochloric acid.
Great idea.
It's like giving somebody with hey, there's a bone sticking out of your leg. Oh, here's a pill that'll make it not hurt. Well, whoop-de-freaking do. I want the bone not sticking out of my skin. And that set me down a very serious pursuit of alternative medicine. I ended up with a naturopath who was able to, good God, I think he spent an hour interviewing me, my first visit, asking me all kinds of stuff that my first thought was, how in the world does this have anything to do with what I'm talking about? And, oh, by the way, yeah, you're right. These things are happening in my body. How did you know? Well, I've since found out this is a guy who understood how things are connected. And he brought me back to health. And that was 19 years ago. He's been my primary care physician for 19 years. Saved my life. I actually found out that my health was, I was one good emotional jolt from a possibly fatal heart attack.
Wow.
I had no idea, but
ironic now that you're the host of the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast. Very ironic.
Crazy.
It's so wild.
Sometimes it seems like, there's there are these rhythms, these energies, these something in the universe, kind of like the waves in the ocean, that things just get carried along with them and get organized in ways that we wouldn't have guessed. And my life kind of looks like that.
It's amazing. I love that.
I realize I'm a nutty. I sound a little nutty, but
no, it's fantastic. It's
like
fantastic. You should. It's funny you mentioned the stress thing and how it can have physical manifestations. The first thing I thought of was gut. I'll bet he had some type of a gut issue. We know the link and how strong it is, gut health and stress and all that stuff. So interesting that was one of the things you were dealing with. So we go to the show, and I always have this thought of, like, if somebody is naive to this information, what they might be thinking. And I don't know how much about this stuff. Obviously, you had sniffed out the medical system was bullshit several years ago, found your naturopath almost 2 decades ago. At least we're taking steps in the right direction. I'm not sure how much you knew about it, but I like to put myself in a position of somebody hearing this information for the first time, what they might be considering. And it happens a lot when I'm listening to an audiobook that's not narrated by the author. Obviously, the author knows everything that he wrote. Someone else got hired to be there and read this thing, and you just wonder, like, whoever's reading Gary Taubes' book or Nina Teichel's book, were their heads exploding? Was that at least one life that was maybe changed? Or this is my job and I don't care whether they're talking about nutrition or paint chips or automobiles. I'm just going to read the words and I'm going to leave. So I want to go back again. At the beginning of the show, you've told me before, because I've asked you, were you genuine in saying, like, I didn't know that. That's really amazing. Can you elaborate on that? It sounded genuine. But again, I could look at this and say, like, okay, I think there must be some type of compensation. If Philip is, the expert and he needs help with podcasting, maybe he's feigning it. Is he interested? Like what was that experience, especially in the beginning of, were you learning this information? Did you know it all? Like, what was that like?
Well, I've been a stage actor and I'm not any good. The last role I had 10, 11, 12 years ago, I can remember when the show ended thinking, well, I got that out of my system. I'd wanted to do it. I did it. It wasn't particularly good. And on I went. So I say all that to say, I love performing, but when I'm behind a microphone, I'm not playing somebody else. I'm me. I'm really good at being me. I'm not particularly good at pretending to be anybody else. I'm just not. And I'm comfortable with that. I do a lot of voiceover work. Um, and I've got a client right now that needs some male voiceover talent. And my partner on it said, "Hey, do you think you could do this?" I said, "No. If you need radio announcer guy, I can do that. I do a lot of that. If you need me to play a character, I'm not wired that way. That's just not how I work." So when I say, "Wow, I didn't know that," it's because, wow, I didn't know that. And oftentimes it might be the third or fourth time I've heard something and it finally clicks in and I go, oh, that's why that's that way. Oh, I get it. Oh, wow. I mean, with Dr. Eid yesterday, my God, she was talking about, it sounds like this is a pitch for the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast, featuring Phil Ovadia with our guest, Dr. Georgia Eid. Yes, please listen to that one. Anyway,
Absolutely.
she talks about um, the process of finding the appropriate med for her psychiatric patients and how utterly unscientific the whole thing is. And, again, it's kind of the same. I suspected as much, but to hear somebody on the inside who knows, not somebody like me on the outside who's just kind of observing the shadows and the outlines and the images of things and saying, "Hey, this is what it looks like from where I stand," but somebody who's actually on the inside saying, "Oh yeah, we have no idea if any of this is going to work." And Dr. Eid said it'll take sometimes 1 or 2 years before they find a medication that will help their patient alleviate the worst of their symptoms. And she said in her correct, forgive me if I'm misreporting here. I think I got this right. She said within the psychiatric industry, they don't talk about healing because people don't get well. They just manage the severity of the symptoms. Um, I suspected as much all along, but when she confirmed it, I was just like, oh, just about the time I think it couldn't be any worse, somebody says, "Yep, it's worse."
It's worse. Wow. Well, okay. So your guests are amazing. Before we talk about some of them, you said it was Phil who primarily is getting the guests. Do you do any like research getting guests? I mean, obviously, there's guests of a certain caliber that you just know they're going to be incredible, like myself. You know what I mean? Like you already know the content's going to be absolutely wonderful if you host me. That's
Oh
a
yeah, I
that's a
was like, "My
softball. You know what
God,
I
we
mean?
got Casey Ruff." Oh wow.
Wow, amazing. Is it mostly Phil that's get like
Well,
finding the guests?
we're at a point now, obviously, where people are approaching us to try to be on the show. I get a lot of that. "Hey, you should have my friend who developed this amazing salve for burns," and it's like, yeah, not interested.
We get 10 a day.
Um, yeah. Um, Phil's team, he has a team of people. There's no possible way this man could be a heart surgeon and do all the other stuff that he's doing. Um, so he's got a team of people who handle basically all the stay off my operating table business except the podcast creation and production. And I'm responsible for the part you see, and well, that's it. I'm responsible for the part you see other than getting the guests mostly. I've landed a couple of guests just because I've sent Phil a note and said, "Hey, this person looks like they'd be good. What do you think?" But mostly it's people that he and his team um, are able to secure. We're booked out right now. This is the second day. This is February 2nd, and I know we're booked into May. So
That's great. Yeah,
uh,
that's amazing.
and frankly, this is not my job. I do this 1 or 2 times a week, and I'm putting, I don't know. Well, you do podcast production. You know the work involved. I'm doing that, but I love it. I'm having a ball because I get to talk to these
Amazing.
people. The bulk of my time is spent with my real business, which is, I'm a marketing and branding consultant.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't have time to
yeah.
track people down. But
Cool.
once I get notification, hey, we're having this person on this date and this time, I go and do research because I like to know who I'm talking to. I can remember
Yeah.
we've had in the last 3 months, we've had two different sleep specialists on, and obviously the jokes just write themselves. We're going to have a sleep specialist on it, but I really did remember thinking, oh God, this is going to be. How are we going to make this interesting? How is anybody going to listen to this? How am I going to listen to this? And as it turned out, these these folks were really interesting. It was really cool. So, um, we've had guests who on a 1 to 10, we've had maybe two guests who were a 5 or a 6 in terms of interesting and exciting. But by and large, everybody's an 8, 9, 10. It's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's, it's astonishing. And it's
Yeah.
really, like I said, I'm promiscuously curious and I'd love to listen and ask questions, and I get to. So we could
So
be
cool.
talking about things I know even less about, like, I don't know, how a turbocharger works on a internal combustion engine. And I don't know anything about that, but if there was somebody who knew what the heck they were talking about, I'd probably end up being interested and want to ask them questions. And
Yeah.
wait, you mean in fact, no, I'm not going to go down that road. See, rabbit trail. This is
There we go. No, it's great. And so on the note of your guests, obviously we've shared a lot of the same people. Dr.
yeah.
Sean Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Georgia Eid, really good examples. We can go down the list. But I made a list of special people who I was introduced to for the first time through your show. So Dr. John Ferreira, all about ADHD, fantastic. Paul Kolodzik, excuse me, all about the continuous glucose monitor. Christy Woods did the same kind of metabolic testing that I did, how I found low carbohydrate to begin with. Kirsty Woods, excuse me. Mary Messissian, I've got to meet her in person. She's amazing. Chris Cornell,
Isn't
Molly
she
Eastman.
cool?
Oh, she's so cool. She's great. Chris Cornell is amazing. I've got to meet him in person. Molly Eastman is one of the sleep specialists. She'll be
Yeah.
on our show
Sleep
soon. So
specialist.
I've
She
coached.
was really good. Oh my
I can't
God.
wait. I get to interview her, I believe, next month. So we'll be hosting her soon as well. And these are all people that I've been introduced to because of your show. And one in particular, I really wanted to point out Andy Schoonover, who is the CEO of Crowd Health. This was particularly special and important to me as somebody who has been unemployed from a corporate job since the pandemic, had to start our own business, and health insurance is absurd. Absurd. This year, the cheapest Obamacare plan for my wife and I want to say it was like $650 or $700 a month for the two of us, with a $10,000 deductible. So you would be paying 18,000, 20,000 before the insurance kicked in. And even then it was like 50% copays. We don't go to the doctor. That's insane. But if I get clobbered by a truck when I'm riding my bike, like, I'm going to need some health insurance. I have now been a member of Crowd Health for the last 3 months. I have been able to personally pay my own money to help other people in this community with an injury, with some type of a sickness, and with a pregnancy. The community has been pooling resources together to help other people. It feels amazing to me. I can do it for about $100 a month. What an incredible experience. And I would not have known that human if it weren't for your show.
Isn't that cool? I
Man,
just saw Andy is God, where was he? He was on something with a massive audience. I was like,
good.
Andy, yay,
Yes,
Andy.
good.
I think Jack Murphy has started a similar setup. I could be wrong about that. The other one you should know is Virgie Bright Ellison, Dr. Virgie Bright Ellison, with Crush Medical Debt. She actually helped me. I ended up in the emergency room a couple of years ago, and I was in there for, I don't know, 2 hours, got an $18,000 bill. What did they do? They gave me a painkiller. They took a couple of tests, said I was okay, and sent me home. $18,000. And she she understands what's really going on and how to deal with it. Um, uh, and she's a medical doctor. She went down that path because she ended up on the patient side of the whole medical fiasco system, and went, oh my God, I had no idea, and started investigating. And as it turns out, uh, these bills are, for all intents and purposes, fiction.
Nonsense.
And at the end of the day, I think what had I been a Medicare payee, in other words, government Medicare was paying this bill, the hospital would have accepted $1,800 and said, we're good.
Wow.
So they billed me 10 times what they would accept from the government. And the government says, we won't pay a dime more than this. Gosh, you guys get Dr. Virgie Bright Ellison on, and send your listeners to crushmedicaldebt.com, I think is the name
Yeah,
of it. She's
that sounds
just I think she's a national treasure, frankly. If you're in
amazing.
Canada or one of those other godforsaken places, is not going to help you. But if you're an American citizen dealing with the American medical system, you need to know what she has to tell you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. We'll definitely be reaching out to her. That sounds amazing. I want to ask if you had any like special guests, but before I do, I want to ask you about one guest in particular besides Andy. Can you
Sure.
tell us a little bit about your recent episode with a teenager named Grace?
Grace Price. Wow. This was another one. I get the notification in my email. We're having this guest on named Grace Price. And my typical procedure is, okay, I look at it. Sometimes there's contact information, sometimes there's not. I just start researching. And it turns out that this girl's got a Twitter account. So I go to her Twitter profile, and there's a link on her profile to this documentary that she's apparently making. And I look at it and it's like, okay, I mean, it seems interesting, but the deeper I go, I find out she's a high school student. And literally, I'm thinking to myself, Phil, what are you thinking? What are we doing? Have a high school student on this show? We have, we had Dr. Tom Seyfried, who's at the cutting edge of cancer research on the show. We've had Dr. Chris Palmer, who is at the cutting edge of mental health research on this show. We have had the best in the world at whatever they're doing, making dramatic differences in how we recover from disease and get healthy. Why do we have a high school student on? I don't get it. And, she is a high school student, so there wasn't a lot of information on her. I'm like, okay, well, hang on, let's see what happens. Well, it turns out this girl goes to an interesting, a unique high school where they don't have teachers. They have adult like mentors who guide them. They spend 2 hours a day in their core subjects, and then the rest of the day they are encouraged and empowered to pursue a passion project. And they tell them, make this an Olympic level passion project. We don't want your passion project to be, I want to find a better way to trim my eyebrows. It needs to be big. And she decided on preventing cancer and started doing the research, and has the guides, the mentors, to help her learn how to read research papers. And so she's done that. And long story short, she didn't say anything that I didn't hear from any of our other guests. What made it extraordinary was that it was coming out of the mouth of an 18-year-old who is concerned about her generation, her friends. And she talked about the way they eat and how the messaging that they are bombarded with about this kind of eating, the utter and complete lack of any kind of information countering the narrative about health. And she's wanting to get the message out to her peers. And part of what excited me about this is when you're 18, 19, 20, you are just by disposition inclined to rebel against whatever the previous generation has told you to do. And by and large, what the generation prior to hers has told her to do is going to kill them young and painfully, and they're rebelling. Thank God. And she's getting the message out to her peers. She's got the support of the adults in her life and the educational system. I don't even know if it's a system. It's just, you know, for all I know, it's probably something Elon Musk put together. She's in Austin. And I remember as that show wound up, I can remember thinking, I have never been so encouraged and so filled with hope for the future as I am listening to this 18-year-old talk, say the same things that all these medical researchers and specialists and genius and doctors and you know, even the what do they call it, the citizen scientists, um, who do brilliant work. But to have a high school student get it and understand it and be able to understand the lingo and the language and be able to, in fact, Dr. Thomas Seyfried actually allowed her to come and interview him in person at his lab in Massachusetts. Um, um, I was impressed by that. So I would say out of 130 episodes, and we've had some fantastic ones, Grace Price was my favorite for that reason, not because of any new information that she gave, but just the overwhelming wave of optimism for the future that I felt. These young adults are rebelling against what their parents' generation handed them, just like I did. Only what their parents' generation handed them is infinitely more idiotic and screwed up than what my parents' generation handed me. And they're saying no. And they're not trying to make it more screwed up. They're trying to make it better. I mean, they really are. I could rant about this, but I was ecstatic. It was so
Yeah.
cool.
I could tell, like, when you were thanking her and expressing your gratitude and also saying how hopeful you were, that came across as extremely genuine. And I felt the same thing listening to that. It was going to be my next question to ask, like, favorite episodes. Is there any other like standout episodes besides mine, of course?
Well, the ones I always refer people to, um, Thomas Seyfried, who's got an entirely different model for what cancer is and how it works. And, you know, spoiler alert, it tests out. uh, Dr. Chris Palmer, um, who's who's treating and helping people recover from uh, um, brain dysfunction that was previously considered untreatable and unrecoverable from. I'm not sure what the how you say that. You can't recover from it. Um, I regularly refer people to those. I've had one that was I don't have a lot of ways to apply it myself. We had Dr. Roshani Sagani, who is endocrinologist. She was the first and only endocrinologist we've had on the show, and she practices in India. So uh, our normal audience is not likely to hear her, but she's put together a medical practice. She in much the same way that so many of these uh, medical practitioners have found out. She had her own health problems, did all the right things, it didn't work, did her research, discovered that, oh, you know, this is a metabolic issue. Oh, what I eat matters. And I did not know that India has a worse problem with diabetes and obesity um, than North America does.
I didn't
She
know
went
that either
into
until
that.
that episode.
Yeah. And what was really cool to me is she has built a practice um, as an endocrinologist who's treating people with endocrine problems. Primarily, it's going to be pre-diabetic and diabetic, but also thyroid problems and I don't know what all. I'm not an endocrinologist, um, but not just treating them physically, but treating the spiritual side of the person, um, which I just love that. Um, wow, that would be a whole big long rabbit hole we could go down. But our the I think we are living through the death throes of um, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the the whole idea that uh, molecules and atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons is all there is. Um, I think we've come to the end of that particular model of reality, and we're finding out that the wisdom of the ancients, which was passed along through myth and through religion and uh, just kind of grandmother wisdom, they understood things that we've intentionally decided just aren't real,
Yeah.
and we're paying a terrible price for it. And part of the price that we're paying physically, we're paying physiologically. Um, you know, I go back to 2005 when my adrenal system was just about done. And news alert, folks, if your adrenals stop functioning, you die. Um, One of the things that helps with the adrenal system is just getting yourself calmed down. It's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing, because when the adrenals are on high alert all the time, you can't feel calm. And there are things that you have to do physiologically, but there's also things that were going on with me mentally and emotionally, and we can use the word spiritually, that contributed to the physiological stress. Prayer, as it turns out, prayer has a phenomenally powerful physiological effect, regardless of who or what you're praying to. It's a anyway, like I said, deep rabbit hole. We could go down that one. So it was really cool that Dr. Sangani is incorporating um um can't remember what she called it, but it's basically people who can help with the non-physical side of recovering your physical health into her practice. They're literally a part of her practice. That was a big one. I loved that. And I'd have to go back and look at my list of guests, because
So good.
there's too many of them to remember. But because uh, um, uh, brain dysfunction is so common now, and because cancer is, good Lord, it's what, the second leading cause of death. Um, you know, I can't hardly go a week without running into somebody who either has a cancer diagnosis or has a friend or family member with a cancer diagnosis. And I will send to them, hey, you need to listen to this, Dr. Thomas Seyfried.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
He's
so
amazing. He's amazing. Yeah, it's hard. I think I hope you're right about the distinguishing between spiritual health, mental health, emotional health. It all just kind of seems to be the same thing. When I started my own personal carnivore diet about 5 years ago, something changed with me spiritually. I didn't join a church. I'm not Buddhist. I just there is something different spiritually when my mind feels more regulated and I find joy in simple things, stupid, a tree or birds or the blue sky or rain, or like it's all just wonderful to me, and you marvel over it more than I did before. And so I can't separate the difference between physical health and mental health, emotional, all of those different things. I think if you can optimize any of them, the whole system improves. And on that note, when we look back at your journey in the last few years co-hosting this show, what things are different in your day-to-day life now than they were a few years ago when you started the show?
I'm definitely, I was keto before keto was cool. Um, and I don't know how I ended up there other than just my particular health journey. I can remember one of the things back in 2005 when Dr. Crizel put me on, uh, you know, helped me recover. One of the things he did, in fact, probably the single biggest thing he did was, okay, here's the foods you need to be eating. Here's the foods you need to not be eating at all. And here's this list in the middle with, you can do this now and then, but by and large, you want to focus on this stuff and avoid that stuff. It was fascinating to me at the time, because there were all these foods on the avoid list that I can remember my whole life being told, you need to eat this. And I'd eat it and I hated it. I really didn't like it. And I'd say, I don't like it. It makes me feel bad. And mom would say, eat your vegetables. And gosh, it turns out my body didn't have whatever was necessary to make use of these foods that I was sticking down my pie hole. And when I quit eating those things and started eating more of the stuff that that actually helped my body, I got well. So I'd figured out probably, I want to say 2000, well, that was probably about that time. I figured out bread just is not good for me. There's no point in eating it.
Mm.
I wasn't completely avoiding wheat of all kinds. I'd still do pizza. I don't know what the thinking was there, but pizza. I'm a child of the
Pizza.
70s. You have to eat pizza. It's a rule. Um,
Even bad pizza is good.
yeah. Oh God. Morning after pizza. Oh God, I
Oh,
love
terrible.
Oh, I just loved it. Um, yeah, I by and large just quit consuming wheat, and so that one new. But what has changed is I've gotten really, really serious about. And it's more than anything, I think it's conscious of eating high fat, low carb, and recognizing how much better I feel eating high fat, low carb. It's For me, it's super simple. I had by and large eliminated all the almost all vegetables just simply because for me, I didn't feel good when I ate them.
Yeah.
Um, I, bananas were one of those things. Oh, eat your bananas. Oh, I hated bananas. They made me feel bad. As it turns out, they're super high carb. So just a bunch of the things that you were supposed to eat that I just did. At some point, I figured out this makes me feel bad. I'm not going to eat it. I don't care if it's good for me. And I grew up in Oklahoma. My dad's best friend was the foreman of a ranch. So we ate beef that was raised within 5 miles of our house and
Amazing.
probably, slaughtered 10 minutes before we threw it on the grill. So I grew up eating really good beef, and I've just, you know, I'm a blood type O. We're beef people. So
Yep.
I was skewed toward that. But with Phil's show and hearing it over and over and over and over again, I was able to kind of categorize the way I like to eat into high fat, low carb. I'm no longer afraid of animal fats. Oh, big change. Vegetable oils are gone from my house.
Good.
Um, we use lard, coconut oil, and a little bit of olive oil. Well, my wife says, she's sitting over here, she says bacon fat. Yeah.
There you go.
Um, and it's astonishing. I feel great. Every time I go in and have anything checked, everything's good. In fact, I was just in the doctor earlier this week for I'm a different related the thing that put me in the emergency room a couple of years ago. I've got some residual effects from it, and he was checking me out. I said, "Yeah, you're healthy." Um, so the way I'm eating certainly isn't hurting me. Um, I started deadlifting again just 2 or 3 months ago, and my strength gains in I think it was early December. Now that I think about it, my strength gains have been quite gratifying. I've been thrilled about that. I loved deadlifting, and um, honestly, I don't even remember why I stopped. But we interviewed. Oh, there we go. Mark Ripito, starting
Yeah.
strength guy. Oh my God, that guy was fun. He's the one who convinced me I need to start deadlifting again. So get this. Uh, my wife asked me, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "I want a barbell." And she tracked down this $300 Rogue barbell. It's a really nice barbell. Um, I think, and she's like the world's greatest shopper. I think she paid $100 for it. So that's what my Christmas present was. I got
Nice.
a really nice Rogue Ohio barbell sitting just the other side of that wall right there. The previous year, I bought about 400 pounds worth of weights because everybody was, getting out of it. So I had a buttload of weights. Somebody asked me if that was a technical term, and I've always felt like it was, but I don't
I
know
think
what
so.
I don't know what the
I think so.
exact quantity is. So
We'll get our fact checkers on that.
yeah, low fat, low carb, high fat. Um, Real serious about the resistance training. Something else that with the and it's not just the sleep specialists who talked about this. It's Dr. Ovadia talks about it, but many of them talk about um, the importance of sleep. And I've just I'm by and large haven't been somebody who's had trouble with sleep, but when I do, I pay attention now. Oh, something's going on. What is this? And so I'm very aware of my sleep. But
Mm,
the single biggest change is every week I get to talk to some really cool, interesting person and ask them questions.
that's amazing. I love that. I love when we every now and again come across a surprise guest of our show. I'm wondering if your wife would like to ask question or answer a question of how her life has changed since you have been hosting the show.
Ooh, well, I will tell you, we got married. Uh, well, we met in June of 2020 and got married in November of 21. And I'm not sure where in there the podcast started, but um, I can tell you the contents of our cupboard have changed dramatically. She was raised a vegetarian, Seventh Day
Mm.
Adventist, and
Ah,
ate um, she ate a high carb, low meat diet. Um, and so her she's changed a lot. Uh, and she's incredibly supportive. I sometimes wonder if she would prefer some of her old stuff, but she's in there with me. She's eating meat like crazy, and she, for all intents and purposes, she eats the way I do. She's
mm,
incredibly supportive of the podcast. We Her desk is right there. We've got an office outside. We've got an office building in the backyard of our house. So we both work from, you know, I commute in my bare feet. Um, so she oftentimes is sitting right there during a podcast and gets to hear it all. And it's been, she's been on the journey with me. It's really
that's
cool.
cool. Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
she doesn't really fight me about any of the changes that I've asked for. She's basically says yes, which is, guys, you want a wife like that. She's
Yeah, what a sweetheart.
I I I hit the jackpot when I found her.
If you are listening and not watching, you should see Jack's face right now. Just completely lit up talking about his wife. Biggest smile of the episode. I absolutely love it. Man, I could chat to you for hours. It's so fun
Oh,
to
good
catch up with
Lord.
you.
Oh my, we've been going and
Can
sorry.
you believe it? Can you believe it? No, it's amazing. I I the weirdest thing. I remember in 2018. I remember writing things that I was good at or wanted to do, and for no reason I put like podcasting. I wanted to do a podcast, but I was working this really busy corporate job, training people, trying to do nutrition coaching, giving people wrong information, and it sucked. And eventually, again, we started our company, we got to start a podcast, and I got to go on this journey. And I sit here in my second bedroom and I have conversations with people like you and experts all over the world. Chris Palmer, Dr. Seyfried, all these amazing people. And then I also get to talk to Hal Cranmer, changing lives in these assisted living
Oh
facilities, a
yeah,
shared guest
Hal,
we've had.
great
Oh,
guy.
incredible,
Oh,
incredible, incredible. I get to learn about people like Grace from your show. And podcasting is something that's really special. And I get the sense that you understand that better than anybody. I've loved the journey that you guys have taken me through. And I can't imagine what kind of impact you guys have put out in the world. Again, I think any one of our listeners would know your show and would really appreciate it and really get lit up every Tuesday morning when we open up our podcasting app and see that there's a new episode of Stay Off My Operating Table. Love the work you guys are doing. I really appreciate your perspective coming on here and talking about what this show has done for you in your life. It's great to chat with you again. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work?
Well, I do marketing and branding consulting, so my website is cultyourbrand.com. That's the best way to find me. I'm currently doing an episode that I'm calling Branding in the Tao, where I'm working through every chapter of the Tao Te Ching.
No way.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm that weird.
Oh,
And extracting branding lessons from the Tao Te Ching. And strangely enough, with the great generationally tested wisdom literature like the Tao, if we interact with it, if you don't have Chris or Stephen Mitchell's version of the Tao, I definitely recommend
I'm
you get.
writing that down. Stephen Mitchell, you said?
Yeah. Stephen Mitchell did this particular, I love his translation. And there's also beautiful illustrations. Uh, yeah, very, very, very worthwhile. But as we allow ourselves to interact with, to get into dialogue with these time-proven wisdom literature, like the Tao Te Ching, like the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures. My next one is going to be the Bhagavad Gita. Um, there's something that I cannot explain. I can only speculate about. But when we really allow ourselves to enter into a dialogue with this wisdom, it reveals things to us that we would have never guessed were there.
Hmm.
I just love the Tao, so I thought, I wonder if the Tao's got anything to say about branding. I and I started reading it that way and then contemplating. And the Tao is just, it's 81 or 82 bite-sized chapters that are sometimes they're just crazy hard to understand, and sometimes it's blindingly obvious, but it's very profitable and fruitful. So if you sign up for whatever it is that I call it there on Cult Your Brand, you get notified of every time I drop a new brief lesson. It's generally every Wednesday morning. So there'll be, I've done 13 so far, so there's another
Nice.
60 or so
Wow.
that I'll be doing. And if you have a locally owned, locally operated business that you want to dominate your market, you might talk to me as well. Quote your
Well,
brand.
you told us before when we chatted that you were getting email campaigns with 50% open rates, which
Yeah.
never ever happen. Like, if you're looking to expand your brand, Jack is probably the person to talk to. So I hope people seek you out. We'll be sure to link that in the notes. We'll be sure to link the podcast in the notes as well. Again, thank you so very much for everything that you do. I really appreciate the content that you're putting out. I'm so grateful for you that you were able to help Phil find his voice. He's now become such a prominent character in the low carbohydrate space, changing so many lives, and you're a huge part of that. And I would argue that you're a huge person in that space as well. So thank you.
That's very kind. I doubt it, but I'll take it anyway.
It's true.
Thanks, Casey. This has been a ball. It really has been.
Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.